In this video, I'm going to show you how to animate this character that I started in a previous video. I'm going to refine the body movements, add an arm swing, and then kind of polish up the animation a little bit. So just kind of showing you from different views what my eventual character may look like. I'm going to step through this so it might look a little different, but I wanted to add a little bit of flair into it, but still make it like a very generic kind of run-of-the-mill 25-frame walk cycle, just to kind of show what that looks like. So with that said, I'm going to open up my other scene. I had already started this one, and I'm going to continue on from this. I'm going to show you where this character is at this time. Right now, it just has a basic walk cycle, have a little bit of body movement and some movement, just have the legs positioned for a general walk cycle. So here's the positions that we have already placed, or I've already placed on this character. The contact, the down, the passing, the up, and the contact on the other side. So this is the mirrored contact position. I'd already added the other positions for the feet on the other side. So this is half of the walk cycle, and then the other half is the other side of the body. So in this contact position, I'm just kind of going to go through this a little bit with the arm positions. One thing to kind of realize in this is in these arm positions, the highest position, the arm, or the highest swing of this arm is in the down position. It's not in the contact position. The contact position is where the widest the feet are, but the arms are not necessarily in that same position. So if you kind of look at this, the arms are still traveling, or they had traveled up at this point. They're still traveling up in the contact position, right? Then they start to swing back down for the passing, the up, and in the contact again, and they're going to be back in the down position. They're going to be at their widest. So the arms are really kind of at the side in the passing position. But I don't have to do too much to I don't have to go to each position and animate the arms. I can do the arm swing to time it with the down position, this being frame 4, and then the next one being frame 16. Now I do have to have a keyframe on frame 1 and on frame 25 so that they blend from one to the next. They have to be duplicated so it looks like the arms aren't, kind of doing a little shift every time it hits frame 1 to 25. So I have to kind of keep that animation going, and there's some refinement that I have to do. But just realize that the position of the arms isn't going to start on the contact and end on the contact. It starts on the down and ends on the down. We'll kind of walk through it just so you kind of get a better idea of that. But that's how that kind of works, right? By the way, these illustrations are straight out of the Richard Williams book, The Animator Survival Kit, which is a gem of a book. You should have it if you don't already have it. If you're planning to do animation, that's really the book to have, a go-to book to have. So these illustrations are straight out of Richard Williams' book, and I've used them to kind of illustrate this in 3D. So another thing about the arm swing that we'll kind of get into that I want to introduce, and I'll come back to this, is that what's happening with the arm is there's some drag going on, right? These sections of the arm are acting kind of like a whip or this wave. So if you think about this person swinging, these are again right out of Richard Williams' book, is the person will swing, and then as the rope starts to slow down and return the other direction, this person's going to sort of swing up. It keeps going. It's sort of like this follow through and overlapping action where it keeps going, or secondary action where it kind of keeps going and then flops back down. So if you think about this as being the start position, the person, or if you think about this like the hand is being dragged behind, right? And when it gets up here, it flips to the other position, keeps going, kind of flips the other direction, and then gets dragged behind again. Same thing with the hand and this arm movement, right? This is it going one direction, right? Think about frame 1 here this is the highest position the hand will be. Now we're going to time this out. So this is frame 4 and 16, but the hand kind of swings around and then drags behind. And then when it gets up to this position, the arm stops moving, but the hand keeps going and then flips around and comes back the other direction. So we're going to show this in 3D and how to get that to work. So I'm going to work on the hands and the arms first. So I've already got the body kind of moving in a general direction, or the body moving just sort of a little bit to give it some life, and I'll come back and revisit the body positions. But I'm going to turn back on the arms. Now for this particular rig, and most other rigs might have Might have the ability for you to turn on and off the visibility of the arms. And I just turn them off so they don't get in the way when we're animating the legs. But here I'm going to animate the arm positions. And again, like I said, the widest position that the arms will be is in the 4. Now, something to kind of think about with this is even though they're the widest at the 4, the shoulder is really at its height right there between 1 and 4, right? If you think about this being the 1 and this being the 4, and then it's coming back down. In here, he brings up, he puts this position on frame 1, but really what's happening is this is the backswing, right? So if you think about this being the 1, the arms are the widest on frame 4. So this is frame 1, the contact position, and this is the down position, right? So if you kind of think about this also when he's coming back down, the passing position is frame 9, right? And you can think about it this way as well, right? This is the arm swinging forward. If this is frame 1, this is this is the frame 16, this would be, pardon me, this is frame 13, this is frame 16. So if you think about this is frame 13 and this is frame 16 as the arm is swinging forward. Now we're going to time this out kind of where it kind of makes more sense. Again, I don't have to go to each position and time out the arms, but what I am going to do is I'm going to kind of position them so that they just swing naturally from pose to pose, right? So I'm going to bring down the shoulder and bring down this arm. Right? And I could do this and back up because I can do this together. If you select this arm, generally most rigs, if you pull one down, if you select both controls of the shoulder, you're going to pull both down, right? And at this point in time, things are going to change because I want to pull one back and one forward. The other thing to kind of think about when we talk about the walk is that on the right leg and the right arm are not going together. As the right foot moves forward, the right arm is not swinging forward. It's swinging back, right? It's always in opposition, sort of like this contrapposto, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit throughout the body, right? But this right foot is going forward, and the right arm is going back. Consequently, the left foot, when it's back, the left arm and hand is going forward, right? So that's what we're going to do. So in this case, my right foot is the first one taking a step forward. So I'm going to move it back, right? And I'm going to move it to about right here. And I'm going to key it, right? And then I'm going to rotate this wrist because I don't think this wrist is in a very good position, right? And typically our thumbs are not out to our side, so it'd be something like this, right? And I'll get into the hands and kind of position the hands. I did a lot of refinement on the character that I showed as an example, but I'm going to kind of get that working for you. And I'm going to grab this one and I'm going to position it here because that should be 4. Now, if you think about this also, the arm swing back is not the same as the arm swing forward. So I actually am going to bring this one forward a little bit, right? And I'm going to key that there. So I should have keyed this one. I just want to make sure I go through all my controls and key them. I'm going to middle mouse drag and key that in position. So I have this positioned here. And then I'm going to, since on 4, it's the highest position, I'm going to bring this up a little bit. I'm doing what's kind of called breaking the joints a bit. And I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to bring that up a little bit more. All right, so I'm just kind of setting my start position here. And on this, I actually want, if sometimes you have the ability to kind of rotate that control, but since this is sort of the wrist control, I'm going to bring it back here, right? And actually, I'm going to keep, yep, I like that with the thumb kind of facing in but forward, right? The same thing here. I'm going to kind of rotate this in just a little bit, right? And then key that. And I should have that keyed and that keyed and that keyed and that keyed. Again, there's a lot of different ways to do walks. There's a lot of different variations in terms of what to do on a character walk. I'm just doing this sort of by the numbers and matching it up to this. There's a lot of different flavors and a lot of different ways you can do it, but this is sort of setting it up where it's sort of following the guide of the Richard Williams book in terms of the poses and such. So I'm going to, what I want to do here though, one thing to think about is this, if this is the height of the shoulder, right? And that's the highest this is going to go, right? I want to back it up some on frame 1, right? And then I'm going to take the elbow, or the wrist, and I'm going to position it a little bit here. And then I'll kind of explain why to a certain degree, right? So what's going to happen is between 1 and 4, that wrist is going to kind of keep going. Like I was bringing up in the illustration from the Richard Williams book, is that this hits frame 1, this hits frame 4 when it comes up, right? So technically this is the height of the shoulder, and this is the height of the shoulder, and it starts to return, but the wrist continues to go, right? So that's kind of the idea that we're getting going here. So I'm going to go back over to this one. I'm going to make sure I kind of set that same thing up. If I go to frame 4, it's the same. I'm going to go to frame 1. I'm going to select these, and I'm just going to back them up a little bit, right? Because they're still coming up at that point in time, right? And straighten that out a little bit, right? I'm going to go back. So they're still kind of coming up. It's going to look sort of robotic until I get some life going on into it, right? So there I am at my frame 4. Now I can go to frame 16 and I can pose them in the other position, right? So again, I can take this one and move it up. Just taking the shoulder and moving it up, right? I'm going to grab this elbow, the wrist, and I'm going to rotate it in a little bit and up. Get it more to the side. Get it to where it's kind of doing that. Press S on the keyboard. Make sure I did it for the elbow, did it for the shoulder. And if I scrub back and forth, I've got that arm swinging up, right? Right. Now I'm going to bring this other one back. So I start with, you can actually select all 3 controls. And I would start with the wrist and then move back up to the shoulder. And you can actually just rotate all of them back. The problem with that is that you get to a certain point and it just sort of breaks, right? So I'm going to get to that point and then just grab the shoulder, right? And kind of get that going. And I'll probably end up changing that position, but it's a good place to sort of start off with. And I'll bring that in a little bit. Press S on the keyboard and bring this one down maybe a little bit. Press S on the keyboard. And let's see how, if I pop back and forth from frame 4 to 16, I should kind of have the arm positions in somewhat similar positions on either side, because that's the pose on either side of the body, right? I might have my right hand up or my right arm up just a little bit more, but I'm going to start from that point. And then again, I'm going to go back a couple frames, right? So if this was 1, that's the contact position is frame 13, and I'm going to rotate these back, right? Press S on the keyboard, grab this one. I'm going to rotate it this way a little bit. Bring it down, S on the keyboard, right? Same thing over here. Grab this, rotate it back, press S on the keyboard to key it. And I could key just specific channels, but I'm going to do it like that, right? Right, so good. Now I'm going to, for each one of these controls, I'm going to press Q on the keyboard to so I'm not rotating them when I grab the controls. And I'm going to middle mouse and drag this all the way over to 25. Oop. Bring that back in because I knocked off 1 frame when I did the walk cycle, but I still need a key there, right? So I grabbed everything that I had keyed and I went ahead and set it to 25, right? So if I look at this now, I have some basic arm movement, right? It's not going to be perfect yet, but I have that basic arm movement going on, and I've got that flip of the wrist. So now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and sort of refine this just a little bit, but I kind of wait until the end, or once I get kind of the body in position and kind of get things going, to go through and really kind of refine this up. As long as I've got a really, kind of solid foundation to work from, it'll work out. And especially like I want to add some little life to the fingers and a little bit more life to the arm swing, right? But if we look at this, and actually what I need to do now is sort of set this shoulder at that height But I'm going to go to the graph editor and I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. So a couple things I want to kind of look at when I do this is I'm just going to look at that shoulder really quick, right? And you'll see how it's kind of holding right there. And really what I want is I want this position, I want frame 1 to be the same as in between these two positions, because this is the height of the shoulder swing on one side and this is the height on the other. So if I just kind of pull this out of the way, you'll see when I scrub back and forth, that's the height on this side, that's the height on this side, right? So really what I want is I want the key that's in between to be shared, or I want this key to be at that position. And this is how I go about it. So since I have this position at frame 4 and this position at frame 16, and frame 1 and frame 25 should be somewhere in the middle there, right? What I can do is I can just kind of get to a point where I feel like is directly in the middle of those two keys. Now, I could go to frame 13 and middle mouse and drag that key over, but the problem is it's kind of flipped around. Right, so where frame 13 is not the same position where 1 and 25 would be. It's sort of kind of around the reverse. So I'm going to go to frame 7, and I'm going to kind of look at this at a few keys later. Right, so I'm actually going to, because the arm swing needs to be sort of in the middle of those two, I'm going to go to frame 10 and I'm going to middle mouse and drag that. I'm going to middle mouse and drag that to frame 1, press S on the keyboard for that. And then go to, again, frame 10, middle mouse and drag, go to 25 and press S on the keyboard. Now when I look at my graph editor, right, I should have, this should be about where it needs to be, right? Now, what I want to do is I need to match these, the angle of the animation curve from the incoming and the outgoing curve. And then I can make any kind of adjustment, because really this curve should just be kind of equal, because it just keeps cycling. It goes up and it goes down. And the angle of this should match kind of in the reverse of this angle. But right now it's sort of acting like this is kind of slowing in and slowing out, right? But I don't want that. I want it to be one continuous curve and not slow down. So what I can do is go up into the graph editor, and there's this spline tangents button. It's right next to, generally you might have Maya set to where they're all automatic, right? So if I turn them to automatic, that's what they're doing. But this spline tangents button, what that's going to do is it's going to angle these as though it's kind of heading in the direction of the next key, which is really kind of what I want. Now, if you look at this angle and this angle does not really match the reverse of this angle. So what I could do now is I can just middle mouse and drag, or actually I can just drag it up, right? To kind of make sure that I'm getting a similar angle to right here, which is about right there. And then I can again hit the spline tangents, or I can select the key and drag this handle up a little bit to kind of give me a good angle that's incoming and outgoing. So this is all sort of one continuous motion. If I were to see this repeat from 1 to 25, we would just see this keep on repeating over and over and over, right? So now when I look at that shoulder, right, I should have a natural arm swing from one to the next, because I mirrored those two keys. Now I need to do the same thing for this other side. If I select the shoulder and then I go to the graph editor, you see that again it's here. Now I could just eyeball these two. Sometimes when I'm animating, I can kind of do this. I could just set it up where I eyeball a little bit and kind of make sure that I'm getting the same kind of angle, and then turn it into spline. And if I need to, if it feels like it's not right, I can adjust this just a little bit, right? So that way I don't have to kind of mess and go around and look at where halfway in between the two keyframes would be, right? Because this is the inverse, like right here on frame 13 would be the inverse of this on frame 1, right? Because that's the contact position, right? So I'm gonna go down to the elbow in this too, and I'm gonna look at the elbow. Now I can kind of fix up some of these keys and make sure that they're kind of doing what they need to do. But this is what you're going to kind of see for that elbow, because you're going to have that little flip of the elbow when the shoulder gets to its height and it returns. This is it dragging behind, right? And the same thing here, it's sort of dragging behind. Now again, these two need to kind of match up, right? And right now it's sort of slowing down when it gets there, right? So what I can do is select that and kind of get that to go, kind of meet in the same sort of angle, right? And now if this doesn't feel like it's working out, because technically I should have this this little hold going on here at the top and the bottom of the curve. So I could just grab these and drag them up. I'm going to drag them together so that they match. The reason I'm doing that is so that they're the same value. And I think I'm just clicking off of it. There we go. Click that. Yeah, for some reason it doesn't want to select both of them, but that's okay. I'll just drag one up. And then what I could do is I can copy that. And then since this is on frame 1, I can just paste, and it's going to set that as the same key, right? And then I can kind of get that going. So that might give me a little bit more of what I'm looking for. And the idea here is that the elbow is kind of holding a little bit. It's dragging behind and then speeding up as it comes through. So again, I'm going to see if I can drag both of these and grab them and drag them down. Yep, that time I was able to do it. All right, so I'm trying to mimic this angle on the reversed. And again, I'm going to select spline, sorry. I'm going to select spline, and I'm going to try to get it going in somewhat of the same direction, right? So if this is the outgoing curve, this would be the incoming curve, and much like it would be hitting this key. Now I'm going to look at that and see what that's doing. So I'm just going to play through my animation. I'm going to knock one frame off, right? Because 1 and 25 are repeated, and I'm kind of getting a nice flow with the arms. And again, I'm going to select the wrist, go to my graph editor, and this one might seem a little complex, so I kind of break it down into each one of its little components, right? And I want to make sure that these are matching, right? And again, I should have a little bit of a hold down here, right? And this should match up with the other key on the other side, or the other curve, right? It should be doing something like that, right? And let's look at the Y. And again, I can do that. So I'm just kind of fixing these up a little bit. If you hit spline, it probably isn't going to work out because this angle doesn't match that angle. So I need to kind of adjust these so that they're sort of matching, right? Now, this might work out, or I could probably bring this down because this first key is lower than this second key, right? If you kind of look at that, and I'm going to kind of blend this just a little bit, right? So technically this one should be higher, but we might just leave it that way and see what goes on, because this is also should be back where the arm is swinging behind, right? Right there, yep. So I'll leave it there for right now, and then I'll select the other wrist. I can always clean these up later and fix them up to how I want them to appear, right? So I think I might leave these and kind of fix them up just by, kind of modifying them in the scene. I might kind of position them and change their position a little bit, right? But if I play forward, you're going to kind of get the idea that the hands are swinging, the arms are swinging, like I do have in that illustration from the Richard Williams book, right? I've got that sort of wave action going on where it's flipping the wrist around, right? It's the same thing here. It flips the wrist and then drags it along, right? So if you kind of look at this, I have it dragging, but if I take the fingers and I modify the fingers, I'm going to get a little bit more drag on that, right? But I'm going to leave it there for right now, right? So now I'm going to deal with the body a little bit. I'm going to hide the arms just so I can kind of look at this a little bit. And the idea behind the body, what I'm going to do with the body here, is there's a couple things going on. So first, to point this out, when the body steps forward, right, when your weight starts to transfer onto that front foot, right, the body is then going to kind of follow along, and then the weight of the body transfers, right? This is a very exaggerated weight shift from the Richard Williams book, from the Animator Survival Kit, right? But one thing to think about is this is the center of gravity, right? Where that heel is, the weight is off of this foot. So all the balance is going right onto that foot. And so if you can kind of draw a line from the head to the foot, that's what's happening. You have this bend in the hips right here. As the weight of the foot is going down onto it, the hip on that side drops down. I'm going to lift the hip on the side on the foot that is off the ground. There is a contrapposto. I'm going to bring that term up again. Remember that term. That's kind of important, right? That there's this contrapposto stance. right? I've got this line for the hips going this direction. It's down on the foot side. It is up on the foot side, right? So the body is in opposition right here, right? When it's in the contact position, it should be straight up and down because you sort of are spreading your weight in between those two positions, right? But when the weight is over the left foot, that's where all the weight is, right? The body is moving in this way. It doesn't have to be this exaggerated, but it can be, right? Especially with a character like this, it's got a lot of weight going on, and we can do that. So the very first thing I want to do, I end up doing, is I try to get these things going in the right momentum first, right? So I try not to worry about so much the left to right. One thing to kind of remember is the forward and back movement of this character, right? If I were to move the hips forward and back, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to cycle on every step. The side-to-side motion of this character, when the weight drops on one foot and then the next foot, it's going to cycle for, it's going to be different cycle for every foot, right? So it's going to be down on this side, then down on this side, then down on this side, then down on this side. So every time the foot steps down, right? So this is going to be back and forth for every footstep, right? So it's going to cycle, forward, 4 times during my entire animation for my entire cycle. But this one is going to do it twice, right? So it's going to be on this side and then this side, kind of alternating each foot, right? So I'm going to deal with sort of the forward and back first, right? And I kind of want to present this in this way, is that the body is moving forward in this position, right? So the body's moving forward and the passing and up. So it's like the body's moving and then the foot catches it on the contact, right? And then it moves back on the down. So I'm going to go to the up position, right? So this is contact, this is down, this is passing, and this is up, right? So I already had moved the body forward a little bit, but I want to I don't want to worry about positioning on each one of these. I want to worry about where it's most important. So on 10 and 22, that body position should be the same. So the same thing here on when it comes down on 10, I want there to be a little bit of an offset for the up and down of the body, or the bend in the body, and also the bend in the head. So I'm going to take these controls, which are the back of the body and the head, and I'm going to press E on the keyboard for rotation, right? And again, I said 10 is where that's going to happen, but so we have 1, 7, 10, right? So I'm going to go to 10, and I'm going to bend this forward just a little bit, right? So I'm mimicking sort of this on the up position, right? 1, 4, 7, 10, right? And I'm going to key that. I'm going to press S on the keyboard. Then I'm going to mirror that on frame 22, right? So I'm going to press S because it's just cycling back. Like every time the character takes a step, it's going to do that. It's going to bend forward, right? So that's kind of what it's doing. Now, the more I exaggerate, the more it's going to look like there's a lot of weight to the top of this character. And it might be a little bit too exaggerated, but I'm going to show you this as a point, right? Then I need to mirror frame 1 and again 25. So I need to bring that frame back, go to 1. Oh, yep. I'm going to press S on the keyboard. Actually, what I'm going to end up doing, because that's 1 and 10, I'm just setting it where it's at, right? So I'm going to go here, press S on the keyboard, right? But I really want 4 and 16 to be where the body comes up, right? So I'm going to do that same trick where I kind of pull the body back a little bit, and I'm going to modify the keys in the graph editor, right? So I'm going to go to 4, key that, and I'm going to middle mouse and drag that to frame 16. And I'm going to key that. Remember, that holds it, right? So I've got the body moving back and forth. And I've got it really exaggerated, but that's okay. I'm probably going to bring it back a little bit. So I'm going to move to the graph editor, and I'm going to press F on the keyboard. And when I do that, you're going to see that those keys, a little extra key there that I'm going to take care of. Oop. There's one. Oh, I knocked a frame off. That's why. Right, there we go. Now, and that means that this one actually, because I did that, I need to move 25 to 1 and press S on the keyboard, and I'm just going to delete that because that was supposed to be for frame 1. Now I could have mirrored frame 1, but I thought I'd set it that way. All right, so now let me look at this. Now where frame 1 and 25 are need to be moved, right? So it needs to be in the same position. If you see that 1 and 25 are coming down, it should be in the same position here, right? Which is, if you think about that position, it should be frame 13. So I'm going to go to frame 13. I'm going to middle mouse and drag it back to 1. Press S on the keyboard. Middle mouse 1 to 25. Press S on the keyboard. And now if I go back to my graph editor, you're going to see that it is now kind of a complete cycle. And again, like I mentioned, for anything going forward on this character, when it's rotating forward, those cycles are going to repeat twice through the walk because it's on every step. When it moves left to right or rotates left to right, and I'll get to that point, it's only going to happen, it's going to be one full cycle for each step. So in this case, it's going to move on one side when the character takes a step on one side, and then another side when it takes a step on the other side, right? But again, I don't want these to be flat because these curves should be going from this key to that key. The same thing here. It's mimicking this curve right there, and that needs to mimic it. So I'm going to turn it into spline, and I should have it pretty good. Now, if I need to adjust it a little bit, I can just click on it and drag it a little bit if I need to, right? But it should be pretty close. So when I run my character through, that's what I should be getting, right? I'm going to go back. And if I look, I have adjusted every single rotate X because I grabbed them all at once and rotate them all at once. Now, I probably want to provide a little bit of offset on that, and I could do that. I could go to each one and provide some offset, but I usually do that when I'm refining everything. But if you select all these, you'll notice that they're all just stacked up because I moved them all together, right? But right now, I only have movement in, if you look at that, the rotate X. For each one of those controls. I don't have any kind of side-to-side motion right now, right? I just have it kind of rotating and moving forward, right, as the character is taking a step, right? It's a lot of motion. Now, I probably want to bring that back down, and one way that I can do that is because this is sort of moving back and forth, if I like the back motion, then I could just grab all this, and I'm going to deselect that rotation, so that I'm dealing with everything. Actually, I'm going to deselect, select them all again, press Q on the keyboard so I don't accidentally rotate it. And I'm going to go back. And then I'm just going to select the rotate axis. I'm just holding down my command key. If you're on a PC, you can hold down the control key and you're going to grab them all. Now, if I select them all and I press R on the keyboard for scale and I middle mouse and drag, wherever I middle mouse and drag from, it's going to scale down to it. Right? So I could scale that down. And then when I look at this, I have a lot less motion going on, right? That's one way I can adjust everything all together, right? So now that I have that pretty much working, and if I turn back on my arms, right, I pretty much have the character, a pretty good motion. I can always refine it later, but I have a pretty good motion moving the body. But if you look at this character from the front, I have not moved it from side to side, right? I do not have what I was showing in the illustration for this character. I don't have this contrapposto, and I don't have sort of the angle going on. This hip would be forward, this hip would be back, right? And it's a contrapposto from the top too, so I'll show you that, right? So the very first thing, the weight is on that foot. And again, this is happening, I'm going to go back to this, happening on the passing position, right? So the passing position here is 10. See, it's contact, that's down, 7 is passing, 10 is up. So 7 is where I want that to be, right? So if I look at the foot positions, you see it's contact, down, passing, up, contact, down, passing, right? So on the passing position is where I want to shift the weight. I want the weight to be shifted at that point in time. So I'm going to go to frame 7. The weight needs to be over this foot. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this control and I'm going to move it over that foot, right? So I can get this. And then I can also rotate it at the same time. Remember what I said is that angle needs to be pointed in the direction of the foot. So if I move it this way, we're going to look at this one. This is where that character's right foot is touching the ground. That's the idea right there. This angle is going down, but this angle is going to go this way, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the controls here, and I need to go through and key all these. I usually press S when I adjust anything. I'm going to select these controls again, and I'm going to rotate them this way. So the character, when I look at the character's weight, it's standing over that foot, right? You can pretty much draw a line from the chin to that character's toe or heel, right? So I'm going to press S on the keyboard for that, and also on this one. I didn't press it originally, right? So I've got that contrapposto stance going on for that pose. Now I'm going to scrub forward and frame 19. So 13 was passing, 16 is down, and 13 is contact, 16 is down, and 19 is, again, the passing position. The weight is on this foot, so I need to move that control over, right? And I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I can go into the graph editor later and make sure that I don't have to make them exact, but I'm going to make them pretty correct, right? And then I'm going to move that hip down. Again, now I'm looking at this illustration, right? Because the character is making a step with its left foot. There it is, the left foot. And I'm bringing that hip down on that side, right? It's bringing it down. And then I'm going to press S on the keyboard. And I'm going to go back to these back controls. Press Q on the keyboard so I can just make sure I'm not rotating it accidentally. And if I want, I can do it from this angle. And I'm going to rotate it back the other way, right? Press S on the keyboard and I'll look at that, right? So now I've got that character kind of in that contrapposto stance. The other thing I want to do is I want to look at the character from the top, right? But I'm going to get to that. I'll talk about this first, and I'm going to do some angles from the top as well, because right now he's just sort of straight. He's just, at a 90-degree angle, right? But we want to get some movement in that, because contrapposto is going this way, but it's also going this way, right? So I'm going to run forward on this. And now I have the character, if I kind of move around a little bit, I have the character transferring its weight, right? It's putting its weight on each foot, right? Now it looks sort of robotic, but unless we do a lot of finessing, it's going to kind of look like that, right? So again, I want to put some contrapposto in the angles from top to bottom now. And so if we look at this, right, this body is thrusting in the direction, right? It's being thrust in this direction of the foot, right? So I want this control to be rotated in the direction of that foot, right? Right, so this is, we're actually looking at this one, sorry, so I need to go back the other way, right? So that's that one, right? That's the pose we're looking at. So I'm kind of rotated it that direction. And now I'm going to take these controls at the same frame, and I want to rotate them. I'm just going to kind of look at it from the top. I want to rotate it back the other direction, right? So I'm just going to grab it here and rotate it back just a little bit, right? So I'm getting a little contrapposto in that, and from the side to side motion. And I press S on the keyboard, right? So that's this position right here, right? And I don't have to do it so exaggerated, but just a little bit to give it a different angle from the shoulders to the hips, right? That's kind of what's going on. Right, with that said, I'm going to go to 19 and I'm going to set up that same thing, right? I could start with here, but I usually like to start with the hips, so that motion starts there. Whoop. And I'm going to go back and look, and it's this one, so I'm going to rotate it this way a little bit. Oop. I'm just going to move it this direction. Press S on the keyboard, right? And now select each control. And now rotate it back the opposite direction, right? Just a little bit. So body wants to keep itself straight, right? So I keyed that. I should have keyed that too. Make sure, yep. Now if I run through this, I should have a nice weight shift going on each step. Now, there's a couple things I need to clean up. Quite a few things actually, but I'm going to show you a couple and I'm going to let you kind of work on the rest. So a couple things that you kind of need to know about this, and similar to what I was doing with the hands, is this works on frame 7 and 19, right? And then I added keyframes in the middle of that too for it going up and down, right? So when I look at the curves like this, it looks kind of like a mess, but I like to go and isolate each one, right? So I've got a couple keys here that's kind of making it stand still, right? So if I go here, that's where the translate X is, if I hit W on the keyboard, the translate X is side to side, right? When the body is in the contact position, the 1, the 13, and the 25, it's pretty much centered because the weight is split between the 2 feet, right? But these are not. So I'm just going to go ahead and take those out, right? And the same thing here. I'm going to take those out, right? And what that's going to allow me to do, I could even take this one out, but it really mimics what's going on with these two. And again, with these, this one and this one, it needs to be the mirror of this. So I'm going to go and just click that again. I'm going to click the spline tangents. Very important. If you want these to be flat, you can choose automatic. I can choose spline as long as it's going back and forth. But if I choose, automatic on this one, it's going to trying to average it out, right? But if I click spline, I can actually just move it a little bit. So it's kind of going from one angle to the next. On these, if I click automatic, it's going to want to make them flat, right? But I don't want them to do that. So I'm going to choose the spline tangents, right? And I'm going to go down the chain a little bit, right? These are not that important, but I don't really need them because they're kind of just modifying the motion a little bit. So I can kind of take them out because what's most important is the height, this height, this low, right? This point and this point, right? Because that's 10, that's 22, that's 16, that's 4, right? This should be mimicked right in here. So 1 and 25 should again be on frame 13. So I'm going to go to translate Y, I'm going to go to 13, middle mouse and drag, and I can just right click and key translate Y. And again, 13, middle mouse and drag to 25, right click, key selected. And now when I look at that, these should mimic, this angle should mimic this as long as I turn these, when I click the, pop it up, spline tangents, right? Then it's going to look like one continuous wave, right? Again. And now I'm going to bring this up again. Remember what I said that some of these controls are only going to cycle once because it's cycling when the footsteps or from side to side. And then some are going to do it twice because of the footsteps, right? So same thing with this, the rotate Y, right? I've got on the rotate Y, these keys are not important because I want these positions to only occur when it's here, here, right? So we have 7, 19 are mirrored, right? Now this is kind of modifying that path. It's kind of adding a little bit of speed change. So that's not a bad thing to have there, but I can't mirror that and expect it to work for these two, right? They're winding up at the same spot, but these curves are not the same, right? So I need to drag, again, I'm going to move these down, right? So I can kind of get the same curve going on. And again, I can, if I select this one, select that key, copy it, Control C, and I go over to here. I don't have to even have that selected, but if I paste it in, it's going to keep that same value. And now I can turn those into spline, right? And as long as I've got pretty much the same thing going, like this curve should actually be this curve. So I think these should actually be even further down. Whoop. Meant to grab the key itself. There we go. Whoop. So sometimes if you middle mouse and drag, you can kind of get that going. So I need this angle to kind of match that angle to a certain degree, right? And if it doesn't look right, when you preview it, then you can kind of just adjust it, right? But I want to make sure that those are sort of matching to a certain degree, right? This one, I can take those keys out. Again, that one, that one, that one, that one should be cycling. And again, I need to bring these up, right? And the reason I do that is because, again, it needs to match that curve. Now, if I turn this into spline, I mean, it might work out just perfectly that way, but it probably will be, kind of need to be adjusted, right? So this one is happening not on every step, right? It's oscillating it, or it's changing its behavior for each step. It's one direction on one step, another direction on the other step. This one is the same direction on every step, right? Because that's the forward, right? And I'm not gonna worry about that one for right now. I'll just kind of show you what's going on, right? So now when I play it forward, I've got him sort of shifting weight and going to each side. Right? And if I take one frame off of this, I'm not going to see that little hiccup. He's just going to kind of keep moving forward. Right? To refine this, what I usually end up doing is I grab the fingers. You can kind of grab most of these fingers, and I'm going to hit F on the keyboard, right? And when it's sort of at the point where it's at its highest, which should be here, right? I'm going to go, hit F on the keyboard, sort of select these controls. Can I go to the back one first? And what I end up doing is I want to flare these out. You don't want to leave your fingers in the default kind of position, but I sort of curl these in because this should be sort of the height at where it's traveling, right? So that's kind of where these fingers would kind of be pushed up and out a little bit, right? I'm going to curl that in just a little bit, right? Press S on the keyboard. And perhaps it would have been a good idea for me to kind of key them in their default positions on frame 1 or another frame, but, you know, I'm going to move these up. And actually, I'm going to middle mouse and drag. That should be at frame 7. So here I'm going to go here. And, yep. Because at this point in time, the fingers are still traveling up. And I want them to be kind of back this direction a little bit. So select those. Select these. Right? Select these fingers and sort of, because it's being dragged behind, right? And I'm going to select this control too, because that should be dragged behind a little bit, right? So what I can do with that, right? See how it's kind of being dragged along, but then it kind of comes up really quickly? I can delay that a little bit, right? I can kind of make sure that that's not happening right there. Right, because I still want them to kind of come up a little bit. So I could actually middle mouse and drag and put that at frame 7 and then come back to frame 4 just with the wrist and kind of drag it down a little bit, right? Get it to kind of drag behind just slightly, right? So there we go. Up and then down, right? And then I do the same thing on the other side. Can I grab that wrist, right? And then eventually I would get to those fingers. I'm going to go to frame 16, right? And that's being dragged behind. So I'm going to middle mouse and drag that to 19. Press S on the keyboard, go to 16 and kind of bring the wrist this way just a little bit, just to get a kind of a nice little sort of pop out of that swing in the wrist, right? Now I don't have this character perfect, but I would end up doing a lot of refinements. But that kind of gets you the basic steps of the walk cycle and getting a nice weight shift. And you could start to add little details and refine things to get it less robotic, right? So right now it just feels very robotic in terms of its movement. So you end up softening out some of the movements to kind of refine how that is moving and flowing, right? Especially let's look at, this is, if we look at that, right? It's the translate Z going forward. And this is where it kind of looks a little harsh. So if I take this out, right? And then this and that need to mimic what's happening on frame 13, right? So again, I go here, middle mouse and drag to frame 1, S on the keyboard, middle mouse and drag. Whoop. I can do it again from 13 to the end, S, because I'm just mimicking those positions, right? So now I've got this, you know, moving back and forth a little bit. And it's happening on every step, like I mentioned, right? But again, I need to make these, didn't mean to do that. Grab those and make them spline, right? So now it's one continuous movement. So now it should soften out the movement just a little bit more, right? So I end up going through a lot of the curves and sort of adjusting where I think that it needs a little bit refinement, and any place where it's stopping, anywhere these are flat, right? I might need to add some adjustment. So I could do this. I could grab these and then I'm going to press W on the keyboard, move them down a little bit. I can do the same thing here. Move these down a little bit, right? Same thing here. Move these down a little bit, right? And then I'm kind of softening out that movement and getting a little bit of a, what they call a moving hold in that, right? So now I can play it through, right? And there we go. That'll pretty much get you started on a basic walk. And the next thing you would probably want to do is refine this a bit and polish it up.